Most people think setbacks stop progress. They're wrong. A setback is not the event. It is your response to the event. The people who stay stuck spend months replaying what happened. The people who move forward spend days learning from it. The difference is not intelligence, talent, luck, or circumstances. The difference is momentum. In this audiobook, you will learn how resilient people transform failure into fuel, uncertainty into direction, and obstacles into advantages. Because every setback contains a lesson, every lesson contains power, and every moment spent moving forward weakens the grip of the past. The goal is simple. Stop carrying setbacks and start converting them into momentum. Chapter 1. Stop asking, why me? Every setback creates a moment of decision. Most people do not recognize this moment. They think the setback is the problem. It is not. The problem begins with their response to it. Something goes wrong. A project fails. A relationship ends. A job is lost. An opportunity disappears. And immediately the mind asks the wrong question. Why me? Why did this happen? Why now? Why is this always happening to me? At first, these questions appear reasonable. They appear thoughtful. They appear necessary. But they serve no useful function. They do not create movement. They do not create solutions. They do not create progress. They create emotional attachment to the problem. That attachment is what destroys momentum. Most people lose momentum because they become emotionally trapped inside the setback. The event happens once. The mind repeats it 100 times. The setback lasts one day. The emotional replay lasts 6 months. The event is no longer causing the suffering. The repeated attention is. That is why two people can experience the same failure and produce completely different outcomes. One person becomes stuck. The other becomes stronger. The difference is not the event. The difference is where attention goes. You have a choice. You can study the pain endlessly, or you can begin studying the path forward. That is the first rule of resilience. The question is not why it happened. The question is what now? Remember that. The question is not why it happened. The question is what now? When your mind starts searching for explanations, redirect it. When your mind starts replaying the event, redirect it. When your mind starts creating stories about unfairness, redirect it. Ask one question. What now? Because progress begins when attention shifts from explanation to action. Most people never make this shift. They become historians of their own problems. They can explain every detail, every mistake, every disappointment, every betrayal, but they cannot explain their next step. That is the danger. Knowledge of the past without action in the present creates paralysis. You do not need a better explanation. You need a better response. That's the key. Now, consider the people who consistently recover from adversity. Business owners, athletes, leaders, they all share one uncommon habit. They accept reality quickly, not because they enjoy setbacks, not because they are emotionless, not because they are naturally stronger than everyone else. They simply understand a principle that most people ignore. Reality ignored becomes reality prolonged. A business owner launches a product. The market rejects it. One response is denial. The owner blames customers, blames timing, blames competitors. Months pass. Nothing improves. Another owner studies the feedback immediately, adjusts the offer, changes the strategy, moves forward. Same setback, different response, different outcome. Reality ignored becomes reality prolonged. Consider an athlete who suffers a major defeat. One athlete spends months arguing with reality. The referee was unfair. The conditions were wrong. The circumstances were unfortunate. Another athlete studies the loss, finds weaknesses, changes training, returns stronger. The loss becomes information. The information becomes improvement. Again, same setback. Different response. Different outcome. Reality ignored becomes reality prolonged. This principle appears everywhere. In business, in health, in relationships, in personal growth. The longer you resist reality, the longer reality controls you. Acceptance is not surrender. Many people misunderstand this. Acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance does not mean agreement. Acceptance simply means seeing clearly. The event happened. That is reality. Now you respond. That is power. You have a choice. You can fight reality, or you can work with reality. One path creates frustration. The other creates progress. The faster acceptance happens, the faster progress begins. That is not philosophy. That is mechanics. Progress requires accurate information. Reality provides the information. Resistance distorts it. Acceptance clarifies it. That's the key. Now we arrive at the most important distinction in this chapter. The distinction between victim thinking and resilient thinking. Victim thinking focuses on causes. Resilient thinking focuses on actions. Victim thinking asks, who is responsible? Who should be blamed? Why is this unfair? Why did this happen? Resilient thinking asks, what can be done? What can be learned? What can be improved? What happens next? Notice the difference. One approach searches for emotional relief. The other searches for practical leverage. One creates helplessness. The other creates capability. You have a choice. Every setback presents this choice. The victim mindset attempts to solve emotional discomfort first. The resilient mindset attempts to solve the problem first. This is why resilient people recover faster. Their attention remains connected to action, and action creates options. Options create confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Momentum creates results. Everything begins with attention. Focus creates power. Remember that phrase. Focus creates power. Not talent, not luck, not perfect conditions. Focus creates power. The moment your attention shifts toward solutions, control begins to return. You stop feeling trapped. You stop feeling powerless. You stop waiting. You start acting. And action changes your relationship with adversity. The setback remains real. The difficulty remains real. But your position changes. You become a participant instead of a spectator. You become a builder instead of victim. You become responsible for the response. And responsibility is where power lives. It's not about avoiding setbacks. It's about responding correctly. It's not about controlling circumstances. It's about controlling attention. It's not about eliminating difficulty. It's about developing discipline. That's the key. The question is not why it happened. The question is what now? Reality ignored becomes reality prolonged. Focus creates power. These are not motivational slogans. They are operational rules. Follow them and momentum returns. Ignore them and setbacks become permanent residents in your mind. In the next chapter, we will go deeper. Because accepting a setback is only the first step. Once reality is accepted, another task begins. You must extract value from the experience. You must find the lesson hidden inside the pain. Because every setback contains information. And those who learn to extract the lesson gain an advantage that others never see. That is where we go next. Chapter 2. Extract the lesson or repeat the pain. Most people experience pain. Very few people extract value from it. That is the difference. Pain by itself changes nothing. Time by itself changes nothing. Experience by itself changes nothing. Only understanding creates improvement. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They assume that suffering automatically produces wisdom. It does not. A person can repeat the same mistake for 20 years and still learn nothing. A person can experience the same setback over and over again and remain exactly where they started. Why? Because pain is only raw material. the lesson must still be extracted. That is your responsibility. Every setback contains information. Every setback contains feedback. Every setback contains instruction. The question is whether you are willing to study it. Most people are not. They want relief before reflection. They want comfort before understanding. They want the pain to disappear without learning why it appeared. That approach guarantees repetition, because ignored lessons return. Unlearned lessons repeat. Unexamined failures reappear. Life keeps presenting the same test until the lesson is understood. You have a choice. You can resent the setback, or you can study it. One creates bitterness. The other creates growth. That's the key. The pain becomes valuable only when converted into understanding, not before. The lesson is the reward. Remember that phrase. The lesson is the reward. The setback itself is not the reward. The failure is not the reward. The disappointment is not the reward. The reward is the information hidden inside the experience. And once that information is extracted, the setback begins working for you instead of against you. The lesson is the reward. Consider a failed project. Months of effort, hours of work, resources invested, energy consumed, then failure. Most people stop at disappointment. They focus on the outcome, but resilient people focus on the data. They ask different questions. Was the strategy wrong? Was the timing wrong? Was the execution weak? Was the preparation incomplete? The failure becomes feedback. The feedback becomes knowledge. The knowledge improves future decisions. What appeared to be a loss becomes an asset. The lesson is the reward. Now, consider relationships. Many people leave broken relationships carrying only resentment. They memorize what the other person did wrong. They replay arguments. They revisit old frustrations. But they never study their own patterns. They never ask what the relationship revealed about them. Their communication, their boundaries, their expectations, their habits. As a result, they enter the next relationship unchanged. And the same problems appear again. Different person, same pattern, different circumstances, same outcome. Why? Because the lesson was ignored. The lesson is the reward. A broken relationship becomes valuable when it teaches you something that prevents future mistakes. Without the lesson, there's only pain. With the lesson, there's growth. Now, think about missed opportunities. Most people regret them. They spend years imagining what could have happened. What if they had acted sooner? What if they had taken a chance? What if they had spoken up? What if they had moved forward? But resilient people approach missed opportunities differently. They perform an examination. They identify hesitation, fear, indecision, lack of preparation. Then they build systems that prevent repetition. Again, the opportunity was lost, but something valuable was gained. The lesson. And the lesson becomes future leverage. Learn once, benefit forever. That is another principle worth remembering. Learn once, benefit forever. Every lesson extracted today reduces future suffering tomorrow. Every lesson learned now improves future performance later. That is why successful people often describe their biggest failures as turning points. Not because they enjoyed them, not because they wanted them, but because those failures forced understanding. The setback became a teacher. The teacher delivered instruction. The instruction created transformation. Learn once, benefit forever. Success often begins with an honest postmortem. Not a self-attack, not self-pity, not endless regret. An honest review. Objective, calm, precise. What happened? Why did it happen? What could be improved? This is how professionals think. Athletes review performance. Businesses review outcomes. Engineers review failures. Pilots review mistakes. High performers do not hide from reality. They study it. Because improvement requires information. And information comes from analysis. That's the key. Now we arrive at a practical system. A system you can apply after every setback. 3 questions. Simple, direct, powerful. After every failure, ask, what worked? What failed? What changes next? Do not complicate it. Do not turn it into philosophy. Do not turn it into emotion. Stay focused. What worked? Identify strengths. Preserve them. What failed? Identify weaknesses. Correct them. What changes next? Create action. Implement improvement. This process transforms failure into progress. Without reflection, failure becomes pain. With reflection, failure becomes instruction. You have a choice. You can experience setbacks passively, or you can extract value actively. One path produces repetition. The other produces growth. And growth compounds. Every lesson improves judgment. Better judgment improves decisions. Better decisions improve outcomes. That is how resilience is built. Not through motivation. Through analysis. Not through wishing. Through understanding. Not through avoiding mistakes. Through learning from them. That's the key. The people who advance faster are not necessarily more talented. Often they simply learn faster. They recover faster because they study faster. They improve faster because they reflect faster. They do not waste pain. They convert it. They transform every setback into instruction. Every instruction into adjustment. Every adjustment into progress. That process can be summarized in 3 words. Extract. Adjust. Advance. Remember those words. Extract. Adjust. Advance. Extract the lesson. Adjust the behavior. Advance with new knowledge. Again, extract. Adjust. Advance. This is the operating system of resilience. The people who refuse to do this remain trapped in cycles. The people who master it continue moving forward. Not because life becomes easier, because they become wiser. The lesson is the reward. Learn once, benefit forever. Extract, adjust, advance. Carry those principles forward. Because in the next chapter, we move beyond learning. Learning creates understanding, but understanding alone is not enough. The next step is reclaiming control. Because after the lesson is extracted, one question remains. What can you influence right now? That is where real momentum begins. Chapter 3. Reclaim control immediately. After every setback, a dangerous illusion appears. The illusion is that you have lost control. A business fails. A relationship ends. A financial problem emerges. A plan collapses. And suddenly it feels as though everything is happening to you. This feeling is powerful, but is often inaccurate, because even when circumstances are outside your control, your response remains available. That is where recovery begins. Not when conditions improve, not when luck returns, not when someone rescues you. Recovery begins the moment you reclaim control over what is still within your reach. Most people do the opposite. They focus their attention on what they cannot change. They think about the economy. They think about the past. They think about other people's decisions. They think about circumstances they cannot influence. Hour after hour, day after day, week after week. And as attention stays fixed on the uncontrollable, helplessness grows. This is not weakness. This is a predictable consequence of misplaced focus. The mind becomes overwhelmed when it constantly studies problems it cannot solve. You have a choice. You can focus on what is outside your control, or you can focus on what remains within your control. One path creates helplessness. The other creates momentum. Control what you can. Remember that phrase. Control what you can. Not everything. Not the entire situation. Not the entire future. Just what you can. Control what you can. If the business failed, control the next decision. If the relationship ended, control your behavior moving forward. If money was lost, control your spending, your learning, and your next opportunity. The circumstances may be larger than you. but your next action is not. And your next action matters. That is the key. Many people wait for confidence before they act. This is a mistake. Confidence rarely arrives first. Action arrives first. Then confidence follows. Momentum grows when attention returns to controllable actions. Not because the actions are always dramatic. Because action interrupts helplessness. Action reminds you that you still possess influence. Action proves that you are not powerless. Control what you can. Again, control what you can. This principle sounds simple, but simple principles create powerful results when applied consistently. Now consider how recovery actually happens. Most people imagine recovery as one giant breakthrough, one massive opportunity, one life-changing moment. But reality operates differently. Massive recovery usually begins with tiny acts of ownership. A person loses a career. They do not rebuild it overnight. They update a resume, make a phone call, learn a new skill, attend an interview. One action, then another, then another. Months later, the results become visible. But the recovery started much earlier. It started with small actions. Consider someone facing financial difficulty. The debt feels overwhelming. The situation appears impossible. Looking at the entire problem creates anxiety. So they focus on the next action. Track expenses. Reduce unnecessary spending. Increase income. Learn a skill. Save a small amount. Tiny actions. Repeated daily. Eventually those actions compound. The financial situation changes. But the transformation began with ownership of small responsibilities. Small actions restore power. Remember that phrase. Small actions restore power. Not giant actions. Not perfect actions. Small actions. A person rebuilding confidence follows the same process. Confidence is rarely restored through thinking. It is restored through evidence. Evidence comes from action. One promise kept. One difficult conversation handled. One commitment completed. One challenge faced. Each action sends a message. The message is simple. You can trust yourself. Again and again. Small actions restore power. This is how resilience works. Not through dramatic moments. Through repeated acts of ownership. You have a choice. You can wait for a better situation, or you can improve your position within the current situation. One creates dependency. The other creates strength. Small actions restore power. Now we arrive at a principle many people misunderstand. Responsibility. The word itself often creates resistance. People hear responsibility and immediately think blame. They assume responsibility means fault. They assume responsibility means self-criticism. They assume responsibility means carrying unnecessary guilt. That is not what responsibility means. Responsibility is not blame. Responsibility is authority. Understand the difference. Blame looks backward. Authority looks forward. Blame asks who caused the problem. Authority asks who will solve it. Blame focuses on fault. Authority focuses on action. These are not the same thing. A setback may not be your fault. A difficult circumstance may not be your fault. An unexpected challenge may not be your fault. But your response remains your responsibility. And that is where freedom begins. Responsibility creates freedom. Remember that phrase. Responsibility creates freedom. The moment you accept responsibility for your next action, you reclaim influence. The moment you reclaim influence, you regain power. The moment you regain power, momentum becomes possible. This is why high performers embrace responsibility. Not because they enjoy pressure, because they understand what responsibility provides. Authority, control, influence, choice. Responsibility creates freedom. Imagine two people facing the same setback. One says, "There is nothing I can do." The other says, "What can I do next?" The first person surrenders authority. The second person claims it. The circumstances may be identical. The psychology is completely different. And psychology drives behavior. Behavior drives results. That's the key. The person who accepts responsibility immediately gains access to action. The person who avoids responsibility remains trapped in reaction. You have a choice. Every setback presents this choice. Wait for circumstances to improve, or become the person who improves them. Responsibility creates freedom. Control what you can. Small actions restore power. These principles work together. Control what you can. Take small actions. Accept responsibility. Repeat. This is not motivation. This is a system. A repeatable system. A reliable system. A system that works regardless of mood, confidence, or circumstances. Because momentum is not created by emotion. Momentum is created by action. Action follows ownership. Ownership follows responsibility. Responsibility creates freedom. Carry that principle with you. Because reclaiming control is only the beginning. Once control has been restored, another challenge appears. Many people know what they should do. They simply hesitate to do it. They wait. They overthink. They search for certainty. They delay movement until they feel ready. And that delay becomes the next obstacle. In the next chapter, we will eliminate that obstacle. Because progress does not belong to those who feel ready. It belongs to those who move. And that is where we go next. Chapter 4. Move before you feel ready. There's a mistake that keeps people stuck longer than failure itself. It appears reasonable. It appears responsible. It even appears intelligent. But it is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. The mistake is waiting to feel ready. After a setback, people often tell themselves the same story. They need more confidence. They need more certainty. They need more motivation. They need the fear to disappear. Then they will act. Then they will move forward. Then they will begin again. But that moment rarely arrives. Confidence does not appear first. Action appears first. This is where many people misunderstand how progress works. They believe confidence creates action. In reality, action creates confidence. The first step comes before certainty. The first move comes before belief. The first attempt comes before confidence. Movement creates momentum. Remember that phrase. Movement creates momentum. Not thinking, not planning, not waiting. Movement. The mind often treats confidence as a requirement. But confidence is usually a result. It is earned through evidence. And evidence only comes from action. Imagine someone trying to rebuild after a major setback. Perhaps they lost a job. Perhaps they failed in business. Perhaps they experienced a painful personal disappointment. The natural response is hesitation. The mind wants guarantees. The mind wants reassurance. The mind wants certainty. But certainty is rarely available. The future remains unclear. The outcome remains unknown. The risk remains present. And yet action is still required. You have a choice. You can wait for confidence, or you can create confidence. One path delays progress. The other produces it. Movement creates momentum. Every action sends a signal to the mind. The signal is simple. You are moving. You are adapting. You are not trapped. And that signal matters. Because the mind interprets movement as capability. Capability builds belief. Belief strengthens action. Action creates more evidence. The cycle continues. Movement creates momentum. This is why successful people often appear fearless. But appearances can be misleading. Most successful people were uncertain when they started. Most successful people were uncomfortable when they began. Most successful people doubted themselves at some point. The difference was not confidence. The difference was movement. Consider an entrepreneur launching a business. The market is uncertain. The outcome is unknown. The risk is real. Yet the entrepreneur moves. The first version is released. Feedback arrives. Adjustments are made. Progress continues. If they had waited for certainty, nothing would have happened. Consider an athlete preparing for competition. There is no guarantee of victory. There is no guarantee of success. The athlete still trains, still competes, still performs. Action happens despite uncertainty, not after uncertainty disappears. Consider a leader making a difficult decision. Complete information is unavailable. Future outcomes remain unknown. The leader still acts, because waiting indefinitely is often more dangerous than moving imperfectly. This is one of the most important lessons in personal growth. Progress belongs to those willing to move imperfectly, not recklessly, not carelessly, but imperfectly. Many people become trapped by perfection. They want the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect strategy, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of themselves. And while they wait, life continues moving. Opportunities pass. Momentum disappears. Time is consumed. Done beats perfect. Remember that phrase. Done beats perfect. A completed action creates information. A perfect plan trapped inside your head creates nothing. Done beats perfect. A finished draft can be improved. An unfinished draft cannot. A launch project can be adjusted. An unlaunched project cannot. A conversation can create clarity. Avoiding the conversation creates nothing. Done beats perfect. This principle applies everywhere. Health, business, relationships, learning, recovery. Growth requires contact with reality, and contact with reality requires action. Perfection often becomes a sophisticated form of avoidance. It disguises itself as preparation, but beneath the surface is often fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty. The solution is movement. Done beats perfect. Now consider what hesitation actually does. Most people think hesitation protects them. It does not. In many cases, hesitation magnifies the problem. The setback happens. Then hesitation adds time. More time creates more doubt. More doubt creates more fear. More fear creates more delay. The cycle feeds itself. A problem that could have been addressed grows larger. A challenge that could have been managed becomes intimidating. An obstacle that could have been reduced becomes overwhelming. Why? Because inactivity allows problems to expand inside the imagination. The mind fills empty space with fear. That's the key. When there is no action, speculation takes over. The problem becomes larger in thought than it is in reality. The uncertainty becomes larger in thought than it is in reality. The fear becomes larger in thought than it is in reality. Action interrupts this process. Action brings attention back to facts. Action creates feedback. Action creates evidence. Action creates clarity. Forward is the cure. Remember that phrase. Forward is the cure. Not endless analysis. Not endless preparation. Not endless worrying. Forward. A person worried about rebuilding confidence takes one action. Confidence improves. A person worried about finances takes one action. Clarity improves. A person worried about career recovery takes one action. Momentum improves. The action itself may be small. The psychological effect is enormous. Because movement changes identity. The moment you move forward, you stop behaving like someone trapped. You begin behaving like someone adapting. And adaptation is the foundation of resilience. You have a choice. You can spend your energy protecting yourself from uncertainty, or you can spend your energy moving through uncertainty. One path creates stagnation. The other creates progress. Forward is the cure. Notice something important. Action does not guarantee immediate success. That is not the promise. The promise is different. Action guarantees information. Action guarantees feedback. Action guarantees learning. And those things are enough. Because learning improves decisions. Better decisions improve outcomes. That is how momentum is built. Not through certainty, through movement, not through confidence, through action, not through perfection, through participation. Movement creates momentum. Done beats perfect. Forward is the cure. Carry these principles with you. Because once you learn to move despite uncertainty, a final challenge remains. How do you continue moving when setbacks happen again? How do you maintain momentum over years instead of days? How do you make recovery automatic rather than occasional? The answer is not motivation. The answer is structure. And in the next chapter, we will build that structure. Because resilient people do not rely on willpower alone. They build systems that make comebacks inevitable. Chapter 5. Build a system that makes comebacks inevitable. At this point, you understand something most people never learn. Setbacks are not the true enemy. The true enemy is inconsistency. A person can survive failure. A person can survive disappointment. A person can survive uncertainty. But repeated inconsistency slowly destroys momentum. That is why resilient people think differently. They do not build their lives around motivation. They build their lives around systems. This distinction matters. Motivation is emotional. Systems are structural. Motivation comes and goes. Systems remain. Motivation is unpredictable. Systems are reliable. Motivation depends on how you feel. Systems depend on what you do. And feelings change constantly. That is why relying on motivation is dangerous. If your progress depends on feeling inspired, progress will be inconsistent. If your progress depends on feeling confident, progress will be inconsistent. If your progress depends on feeling ready, progress will be inconsistent. You have a choice. Build your life around emotion, or build your life around systems. One creates instability. The other creates resilience. Systems survive setbacks. Remember that phrase. Systems survive setbacks. When life becomes difficult, emotions become unreliable. Stress increases. Energy decreases. Motivation disappears. Confidence fluctuates. But systems continue. A person with a reading system keeps reading. A person with a training system keeps training. A person with a work system keeps working. Not because they feel like it, because the system already exists. The decision has already been made. That is the power of structure. Systems survive setbacks. Now consider what happens during difficult periods. This is where systems prove their value. When life is stable, almost anyone can perform well. The real test comes when circumstances become challenging. The real test comes when setbacks appear. The real test comes when emotions become unstable. This is where habits become recovery mechanisms. A daily walk, a morning routine, a scheduled work session, a consistent bedtime, a simple planning process. These behaviors may appear small, but during difficult periods, they become anchors. They provide stability when emotions become chaotic. They provide direction when thinking becomes clouded. They provide momentum when motivation disappears. Discipline outlasts emotion. Remember that phrase. Discipline outlasts emotion. Many people wait for the right mood before acting. Disciplined people act regardless of mood. Many people wait for inspiration. Disciplined people follow the process. Many people negotiate with themselves. Disciplined people execute the plan. That is the difference. Discipline outlasts emotion. This does not mean becoming rigid. It does not mean becoming robotic. It means creating behaviors that remain active even when circumstances become difficult. Because difficult periods are inevitable. Setbacks are inevitable. Challenges are inevitable. The question is not whether they will appear. The question is whether your systems can survive them. You have a choice. Create habits only for good days, or create habits that function on bad days too. One approach collapses under pressure. The other grows stronger because of it. Discipline outlasts emotion. Now we arrive at the final lesson. A lesson that separates resilient people from everyone else. Most people define success incorrectly. They define success as never failing, never struggling, never falling behind, never making mistakes. This definition guarantees frustration because failure is part of growth. Mistakes are part of learning. Setbacks are part of progress. The goal is not perfection. The goal is resilience. Understand that clearly. The goal is not perfection. The goal is resilience. A resilient person is not someone who never falls. A resilient person is someone who consistently returns. Returns to the process. Returns to the routine. Returns to the mission. Returns to the path. Again and again. That is why long-term success comes from repeatedly recovering, not avoiding failure. Recovery is a skill. Recovery is a system. Recovery is a habit. And like every habit, it improves through repetition. Fall, learn, rise, repeat. Remember those words. Fall, learn, rise, repeat. You fail, you learn, you rise, then you continue. Again, fall, learn, rise, repeat. This is how confidence is built. This is how resilience is built. This is how momentum becomes permanent. Not because setbacks disappear, because recovery becomes automatic. The strongest people are not those who avoid adversity. They are those who develop systems strong enough to survive it. Systems survive setbacks. Discipline outlasts emotion. Fall, learn, rise, repeat. These are not motivational phrases. They are operating principles. Principles that work whether you feel inspired or not. Principles that work whether conditions are favorable or not. Principles that work because they are rooted in reality. Carry them forward. Apply them consistently. Trust them when emotions become unreliable. Because resilience is not built in a single moment. It is built through repetition. And repetition creates identity. Eventually, recovering becomes part of who you are. Not something you occasionally do. Something you become. You now understand the truth about setbacks. They are not barriers. They are tests. Tests of your focus. Tests of your adaptability. Tests of your willingness to move forward when moving forward is difficult. Every setback gives you two choices. You can relive it, analyze it endlessly, blame it, fear it, and allow it to define your future. Or you can learn from it, extract the lesson, reclaim control, take action, and transform it into momentum. Remember what you've learned. Stop asking why me. Extract the lesson. Control what you can. Move before you feel ready. Build systems that keep you moving. Because resilient people are not people who never fall. They are people who refuse to stay down. So here is your challenge. Think about the setback you have been carrying. Right now, identify one lesson from it. Identify one action you can take today. Then do it immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Turn the setback into a step forward. And prove to yourself that momentum is always one decision away. And if this audiobook helped you think differently about adversity, subscribe to the channel. Not for motivation, for continued training. Because growth is not a single lesson. It is a process, a discipline, a system. More importantly, take what you learned and apply it. Because knowledge without action changes nothing. The lesson is only valuable when it becomes behavior. Until next time, remember, systems survive setbacks. Discipline outlasts emotion. Fall, learn, rise, repeat.